Now today we're looking at the very popular Audi and Volkswagen oil filter. Now the reason why I say it's popular is because this is made for their 2-liter engines. So the A3, the A4, the A5, the Q3, the Q5, the Tiguan, the Jetta. There are so many different models that this works with. And again, it's for their 2-liter. And look at the size of this filter. For a 2-liter, it is absolutely massive. I really like that they give you, I'm expecting a lot of surface area when we cut open the filter. Now typically this is good for 1 year or 10,000 miles as an average. Every vehicle, some vehicles may maybe a little bit different, but as an average 1 year, 10,000 miles. And before we cut it open, let's take a look at the gasket here. This is most likely nitrile rubber. Very thick surface area, which is nice considering this can be on an engine for 10,000 miles, and really nicely constructed. Of course, whenever you change your engine oil, just put a thin dab of clean motor oil on the gasket. That makes it easier to remove the next time you change the oil in the filter, or the filter I should say, but also it makes a very good connection point in terms of preventing any leaks. Again, before we cut this open, I know a lot of Audi and VW guys will also run Mann filters, and we've opened up a Mann oil filter probably over a year ago. But in this case, this filter here is made in Germany. The Mann filter was made in the USA. So slight difference. I've had some comments if we can open up a Mann filter made in Germany. Well, here it is pretty much. So that being said, let me go ahead and cut it open, and let's see what it looks like on the inside. Now right off the bat, this was not fun to cut open. I typically try to use a oil filter cutting tool, and it makes the job very easy to open up these filters, but in this case, the end of the filter was so large it just didn't fit in that tool, so I had to do it the old-fashioned way with a hacksaw, but nonetheless we did get it open. So right on top here, this is your anti-drain back valve. The whole point behind this valve is when you shut off the engine, this retains the oil inside the filter so you don't have a dry start. In other words, the next time you start your vehicle, there's oil readily available. The oil is not draining out of the filter. Also retains the pressure, the oil pressure inside the filter. So again, it's just a safety feature. Now where you see a difference, this is the first time I've come across, really doesn't matter, but this is a white, in this case. Typically they're black nitrile rubber, and sometimes, let me give you an example, sometimes they're red. And I'll explain the difference. This comes from a Bosch oil filter right here. Let me show you a nitrile rubber. Now this is silicone. It is nitrile rubber, okay? Now, this, so in other words, every oil filter we've ever opened, they always have an anti-drain back valve. The difference is the material that they use. So on your lower costing oil filters, they will be a nitrile rubber. On your higher end oil filters, they will use a silicone. Now the difference really comes down to the temperature range. Silicone could just withstand temperatures, lower temperatures and higher temperatures much better than rubber. And I believe it's down to minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit and up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Silicone can really withstand those temperatures very well, and nitrile rubber just can't withstand those temperatures nearly as well. So on your higher end oil filters, they use a silicone anti-drain back valve. And again, this is a 1 year, 10,000 mile filter. You would expect to find a silicone anti-drain back valve as opposed to rubber. If you're curious, rubber, nitrile rubber is used with the cheapest Purolator oil filters, the STP Blue Can oil filters, for example, this guy. Fram no longer does. Fram Extragar is now nitrile, silicone, so they've upgraded. But on your lower costing, I would say typically $5 and cheaper, they run a rubber anti-drain back valve. Okay, now let's take a look at, wow, look at this, very nicely constructed. Take a look at the can. If you're curious what that is, wow, this is really nice. This is just a stamped piece of steel, just to give you a comparison what they typically look like. This is certainly the thickest one I've ever come across. Incredibly strong. So take a look at the thickness, the difference. Maybe a little hard to pick it up on camera, but this is quite thick. But what this does, this just keeps all the components really nicely compact inside the filter. Typically you find either a stamped piece of steel or a coil spring, which I don't have one right here right now, but sometimes they'll use a coil spring, the oil filter manufacturers. But this is a really thick piece of steel, really nice. But of course this is what we want to see. This is the media itself, and look at the construction of this filter. Very nicely made. Look at the spacing. The other thing that that catches my eye is I don't see any gluing whatsoever. In other words, on some filters, let me show you, for example, on some filters sometimes you see the gluing. In other words, they're taking the metal end caps and putting it onto the media, and sometimes you'll see this the glue. In this case, it's just such a clean construction, really nicely made. I tell you, this runs for around $10 on Amazon. If I had a VW or an Audi, I would certainly run this just by the looks of it. Really nicely constructed. On top here, this is your bypass valve. Okay, so the whole point behind this bypass valve is, let's say for whatever the reason, if you're drag racing, you're towing, or just you've used this filter way over its capacity, what happens is the filter could start to squeeze in and block the oil flow. So if for any reason, if this starts to get clogged up, this little valve opens up, and then unfiltered oil would at least get back in the engine. So this is another safety feature that you find on oil filters, but this is a very nicely made filter. So again, 1 year, 10,000 miles, metal end caps, the center tube, which you can't see, I'm sure is metal as well. Now regarding the construction of the filter, this is most likely a blend, and I'll explain. On your lower costing oil filters, for example with this STP, this is fiberglass cellulose, typically runs up to 5,000 miles. When you're starting to get into Bosch, for example, your Purolator 1, which is their middle filter, Napa Gold, then they start to run a blend of synthetic along with glass or fiberglass or cellulose. And what that means is obviously now it starts to last longer, the filter. So that's how you get your 1 year, 10,000 mile recommended interval for this filter. If you want to go beyond that, then you have to run Wix XP, Amsoil, Royal Purple, Napa Platinum, Purolator Boss, and what they'll use is 100% synthetic fibers. Now just cutting open these filters over time, there's a certain tactileness to synthetic filters. In other words, the touch of it. And this does not feel like synthetic to me whatsoever, but that makes perfect sense just because this is a 10,000 mile filter. So that being said, don't go crazy regarding is it fiberglass or synthetic or you know what's going on. The bottom line is follow what your vehicle manufacturers, the owner's manual for your specific vehicle recommends on how often to change the filter. You'll be perfectly fine. If I had a VW for sure or an Audi, I would run this and just change the oil every 10,000 miles and run synthetic motor oil, and I would be perfectly happy with that. One last thing is, if you're curious if this is wire backed, it doesn't seem to be wire backed to me. We could cut it open, but I want to keep it whole at this time just for a future video I have planned. But that being said, wire backing, what that does is on your higher end oil filters running $15+, they'll use a wire backing, which prevents the filter from collapsing on itself. So on your higher end filters you have that, but again they're also rated up to 15,000 miles or some 25,000 miles in certain filters. So that's why you can have that wire backing. In this case it's not wire backed, but that's perfectly fine. And just to wrap it up, taking a look at this base plate, what's interesting with this filter is that it has the threaded end built into the filter. So obviously they use this is Loctite on the end here. You can see this reddish purplish material, dried material, and so this thread goes into this part of the base plate, keeps it nice and secure, and this is the actual part of the oil filter right here. So this can really connects. Ooh, see if it's back on. I sort of hacked it up, but this can meets the oil filter here. So this is the true base plate, and then this guy is for the threaded end. So I hope this gives you a pretty good idea. The bottom line is, if you're running a VW or an Audi, you can feel pretty darn secure at how well this is made. Thank you for watching. Any questions, comments, please leave it below. We'll see you next time.